All right, so we are now joined by our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, who's going to talk to us about this issue as well as the coronavirus. But let's start with Hosni Mubarak. People will have, I guess, mixed reactions to his life and his legacy.
Yes, indeed, mixed reactions, because you know that during his rule, there were challenges on issues of human rights and freedom of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of speech. But the same can be said now in terms of what's happening in that country. Because when you look at the situation now in Egypt, there are concerns that there are challenges when you look at the issues of freedom of media and freedom of expression. And in terms of the economy is doing well, but they are still rebuilding in terms because of the previous challenges they had. Therefore, it is indeed a mixed bag.
His was a very strong voice in the region for so many years. And we know that the Middle East is not an easy place when you think about the countries that are there. And in many ways, to have a person who was in power for so long and a consistent voice perhaps helped in that situation. Things have changed somewhat when voices like Mubarak's have disappeared.
Yes, things have changed, but like I indicated, you still have a problem of human rights abuse, particularly the media in that country. You know, many journalists, the Al Jazeera journalists, are still in prison because of the stories they covered there. And also you still have remnants of the military rule. You know, it's not business as usual, much as it's a democratic government based on the outcome of the elections there. But you still have people who are really worried about the situation in Egypt. You know very well Egypt was currently the chair of the African Union. And one thing that people were complaining about around Egypt or the region there, the situation in Libya, there were accusations that Egypt has taken a side in that conflict, that is the internal conflict. And therefore, there's still a lot that the current leader, Al-Sisi, has to do to ensure that the perceptions around the world are different based on what he is doing. But it will take a brave approach from him to ensure that the situation does change, but also his relations with some countries outside the continent. You know that when you look at his relationship with Egypt, with the USA, the United States of America, other people are saying it's to the detriment of the continent. Others are saying he has a right bilaterally to have different relations with other countries in different parts of the world.
All right, so very interesting times, and this issue of his legacy will be debated much in the same way as Arap Moi, who died earlier this month as well. Depending on your age and how you experienced his leadership over the years, you'll certainly come up with different thoughts about Hosni Mubarak, who's passed away today. The other issue that we're going to be speaking to our foreign editor about is the coronavirus. The World Health Organization, the WHO, has called on countries to boost their readiness against the COVID-19 coronavirus, saying that the virus is literally knocking at their countries' doors. The WHO spokesperson, Christian Lindemeyer, spoke at the news briefing in Geneva, says that WHO officials are meeting in Rome to discuss measures taken in Italy, which he says are pretty strong. A mission to Iran, which had been announced for Tuesday, has been delayed, and there's no date yet set for its departure. This comes amid confirmation that Iran's deputy health minister has tested positive for the COVID-19 coronavirus and is now under quarantine. That's according to a spokesperson for Iran's health ministry. Lindmeyer says that many countries have pandemic plans ready, and some may act upon them depending on their situation. But the moment that the WHO itself does not plan another big announcement, such as when it declared an international emergency on January the 30th. Chinese scientists are reported to have developed an oral vaccine to protect against the COVID-19 coronavirus. They're now hoping to conduct clinical trials. US researchers are also reported to have developed a vaccine. Experts have warned that until full clinical trials have taken place, it's unclear just how safe or effective these vaccines will be. The total number of coronavirus infection cases globally has now passed 80,000, and more cases of the virus, which causes a respiratory disease known as COVID-19, are continuing to emerge, with outbreaks in South Korea, Italy, Iran, now causing concern. However, most infections are in China, the original source of the virus, where more than 77,000 people have the disease and over 2,600 have died in China. Well, let's chat again to our foreign editor, Sophie. The coronavirus, the WHO warning that it's literally knocking at people's doors. We may be in a false sense of security, some of us, that we don't have it.
Well, you know very well that we have relations with other countries, and the movement of goods and services, it's something that you can't avoid, and therefore none of the countries on the continent are immune to this problem. And it is for that reason the African Union Center for Diseases has set up a strong team to look at this issue, and countries are daily giving reports in terms of what they have found out in their countries, or perhaps people who have been taken for testing and the results thereof. For now, there's no reported case on the continent, but we cannot say we are immune from this. And you look at what's happening in Iran. Nobody thought that Iran will be having this problem. I mean, the Deputy Minister of Health, the person who was communicating this problem, he is now in a situation where now he has to face the quarantine, and also now he can't communicate because he has tested positive. And we are told that unfortunately he had a press conference, and people who were around him at the press conference, that would include intelligence people and other ministers, the Minister of Trade, might have been affected by the situation, and they may perhaps test positive later when they undergo the test. And therefore it means that anyone can be affected or infected by this challenge. And we saw yesterday how the markets globally reacted, and it might even affect the economic growth around the world. I was saying yesterday, I expect the World Trade Organization to convene a meeting in terms of what can be done to ensure that it doesn't affect the global economy, because it will have a serious implication. We might see another recession. And I'm also expecting the Minister of Finance in South Africa tomorrow to touch on this issue, because it is a reality. It might have an impact in terms of our economic growth. You know that currently issues of exports and imports are a challenge, because we can't send products outside the country. We can't receive products. Our correspondent in Kenya, Sarah Kimani, visited a market and businesses in Kenya. They can't import goods from China, and you know China is our largest trading partner on the continent, because there are no flights going to China and coming from China to Nairobi. Right. And there are many countries that have a similar problem.
In fact, it's happening here at home already. I mean, yesterday you talked about the markets crashing. The JSE yesterday lost 4.8%, which is its largest single-day drop since 2008. And so it is affecting us. And I think yesterday we also did a story on how lobster sales out of South Africa have been affected. So I guess this siege mentality and shutting countries' borders is not helping.
It's not helping. That is why when I spoke to the Secretary General of the United Nations at the AU Summit 2 weeks ago, he called on member countries not to isolate those countries that are dealing with this crisis, because you will be shutting down communication, you will be shutting down trade, and you cannot have a situation where people have stigma because they come from those countries. But unfortunately, it's happening. We saw many countries saying they will not allow their flights to fly to Iran. We saw Russia last week saying they won't allow people from China to come into Russia and the BRICS meeting that was supposed to take place last week, they had to resort to the teleconference preparations for the BRICS summit because the delegation from China couldn't make it to Russia. You can see it is a serious problem. I am shocked that sometimes we don't really cover this story as we should, to sensitize people and also to be ready, because like you are saying, everybody was surprised yesterday all of a sudden when markets had problems, and because we've been sleeping, we thought this thing is off. There's no way. And that is why the Secretary General yesterday went to Geneva, where he met the World Health Organization to get information in terms of what they are doing to ensure that the whole world is aware and there's synergy. People are working together. We don't isolate people, but we really ensure that this disease doesn't spread. But unfortunately, it is spreading.
Yeah, Iraq definitely very hard hit. Italy seems to be another country that's also feeling the strain right now.
Yes, Italy is having the same problem. Yesterday, World Organization gave statistics, and we know that there's supposed to be a meeting in Rome. This matter is going to be high on the agenda. And it's surprising that Africa, we haven't reported a single case. It's very surprising, because when you look at the trade and movements of goods and services between us and Asia, it's quite huge. South Africa in particular, you know, our first priority is to have trade with South-South countries. That would include Asia. And therefore, I don't know, I just hope one day we are not going to wake up to a shock that we do have such cases. I'm hoping and thinking that perhaps the African Union is telling the truth and they have their plans in place in terms of how to handle this issue should there be any crisis. And I think what we need right now is an urgent meeting of ministers of health on the continent to share information constantly.
All right, let's hope these vaccines work as well quite quickly. Sophie, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks indeed for your insights.
Thank you, Peter.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll have more for you coming up right after this. Stay with us.